I wasn't supposed to be there. The meeting had ended 20 minutes ago, people dispersing with the usual click of heels and buzz of nervous chatter. I'd forgotten my notebook, an old habit, that absent-mindedness, and when I came back for it, the door was still slightly ajar. She sat at the head of the long table, back straight, hands pressed together so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Her eyes were fixed on nothing. There was a kind of storm behind them, but it wasn't loud. It was the kind of storm you only notice if you stop talking long enough to listen. I should have backed away, closed the door quietly, left the room, and let her have that moment. But then she spoke, softly, like a crack in glass. "I'm the boss. I can't fall apart," she whispered. It wasn't meant for me. Not really. But it landed in the space between us, like a secret accidentally spoken out loud. She didn't see me at first. I think part of her didn't want to. Her posture stiffened when I stepped in. I didn't say anything clever. I didn't offer a joke or a solution. I just stood there, the weight of her words settling into my chest. Then I said it. "In my arms you can." Her gaze lifted slowly. There was no surprise in it, no fear, just exhaustion, the kind that lives deep in the bones, where no one dares to look. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. But I saw something shift, just enough. I didn't walk closer. I didn't touch her. I sat down in the chair nearest to hers, across the table, like someone taking vigil beside a stranger's burden. The silence between us grew thick, but not uncomfortable. It was like breathing in a truth neither of us had dared to name until now. "I didn't sleep last night," she said. Finally. I nodded. I figured. Deadlines, meetings, board pressure. It never ends. They expect me to be perfect, always. "You don't have to be perfect here." She looked at me as if I'd said something sacrilegious. Then her face softened, and she let out a small, almost imperceptible laugh, dry, brittle at the edges. "You're not like the others," I shrugged. "That's been said. Not always as a compliment, I imagine." "No," I said, "but I've come to prefer honesty over popularity." She leaned back in her chair, her eyes on the ceiling now. "Do you ever feel like everyone else gets to break, but not you?" "Sometimes," I said, "but it helps to know someone would catch me if I did." The words hung in the air longer than I expected. She didn't respond, just closed her eyes for a few seconds. When she opened them again, they weren't as sharp. Something had softened. Not much, but enough. "I should go," she said. I nodded, standing slowly. "I'll walk you out." She didn't refuse. She didn't thank me either. But as we stepped into the hallway side by side, her hand brushed mine. Not a touch. Just proximity. Just gravity doing its quiet work. We didn't speak again until we reached the elevator. She pressed the button, then looked at me. "You didn't hear that, okay?" I met her eyes. I heard it, and I won't forget it. The doors opened, and she stepped in. Just before they closed, she looked at me one last time. Not like a boss. Not even like a woman. Just someone, tired, real, seen. And then she was gone. The next day, everything was as it had always been. Lights too bright, phones ringing in staccato, the clatter of keyboards and half-hearted greetings in the hall. But something had shifted, not around us, within. She walked past my desk twice before noon. Each time, her pace slowed, eyes flicking toward me, then away. No smile, no acknowledgement, just awareness. As if remembering that someone had seen behind the curtain and chosen not to run. I didn't chase it. I didn't even meet her gaze. There's something sacred in not demanding more than what someone is ready to give. And if yesterday had meant anything, it wasn't a door flung open. It was a crack barely visible, and I knew better than to push. I worked through the morning in measured quiet. At one point, someone asked if I was feeling unwell. I lied and said I was just focused. The truth was harder to explain. That I was thinking about a woman who had whispered her breaking point and then walked away like nothing had happened. At 4:13, I received an internal message. Short, formal. "Meeting in B12. Bring Q3 data. EE. No hi. No punctuation after the EI. Just the kind of message you send to someone who matters in function, not feeling." I stared at it for a moment longer than I should have, then gathered my things. When I entered the room, she was already seated, Her posture was perfect again, every strand of hair in place. The shield was back, but her fingers tapped lightly against her mug, and that small restless motion betrayed her. We didn't speak of yesterday. We reviewed numbers, cross-checked projections, and discussed a vendor transition. 27 minutes of efficient, emotionless dialogue, but every now and then her eyes met mine and lingered just a fraction too long, as if searching for a sign that I hadn't misunderstood her silence. When the meeting ended, I closed my laptop slower than usual. She noticed. Of course she did. Emma was the kind of person who noticed everything except what was happening inside her. As I stood to leave, she said, quietly, "You didn't repeat it." I paused. Didn't need to. Her shoulders eased just slightly. Then she nodded toward the door. "Thanks for bringing the numbers." That night, I walked home instead of taking the train. The air was cold enough to sting, and I welcomed it. There's something cleansing about cold, how it cuts through noise, forces you inward. I kept replaying the way her voice sounded when it dropped the mask. It wasn't weakness. It was the opposite. Most people never get there, to that edge where truth lives. The next morning, there was a coffee cup on my desk. No note, just black coffee, the way I take it. No one said a word, but I knew, and she knew I'd know. Sometimes the loudest conversations happen without sound. There's a particular kind of tired that doesn't show in the eyes, but in the way a person holds their breath between sentences. Emma had that kind of tired. I saw it again 3 days later, just past noon, when I walked into the break room and found her standing over the sink, blotting her blouse with a paper towel, the faint brown stain of spilled coffee spreading across the fabric like defeat. She didn't hear me at first. Her jaw was tight, movements sharp, controlled. When she noticed me, she didn't flinch, just let out a short breath, half a laugh. "Perfect," she muttered. "Exactly what I needed." "It'll dry," I said. She didn't look at me. "Not before the investor check-in, and I have 10 minutes. There was a vulnerability in her voice, but not the kind that begged for help, more like someone used to fixing everything on her own, irritated at herself for slipping. Without thinking too much, I turned and left the room. 2 corridors down, there was a dusty cabinet in a forgotten corner where leftover company swag lived. Hoodies, polos, umbrellas no one wanted. I found a plain dark grey zip-up, still in its plastic, not exactly high fashion but clean, neutral, safe. I returned and held it out to her. She blinked at it, then at me. "It's not much," I said, "but it'll cover the stain." For a second, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she reached for it, fingers brushing mine. Her skin was cold. She didn't thank me. She didn't need to. I stepped out to give her space. Minutes later, I was at my desk when she passed by. The jacket fit loosely on her, sleeves bunched at the wrists. She didn't stop walking, but her hand reached back and tapped my desk twice, an acknowledgement. Subtle and sure. That evening, it rained. The kind of relentless, sideways rain that turned umbrellas into broken skeletons. I stood in the lobby, watching it pelt the pavement. I wasn't in a rush. Then I saw her, holding a tablet over her head like a makeshift shield, already soaked at the edges. I stepped forward and raised my umbrella. "Don't argue," I said. "Just come under." She hesitated, then stepped closer, into the small, dry space between us. We didn't speak. The city around us roared, but under that fragile umbrella, everything felt quieter. She walked close, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the tension leave her shoulders with each step. 2 blocks later, she stopped at the subway entrance. "This is me," she said. I nodded. She looked up at me. Raindrops caught on her lashes. "You always do this?" "Do what?" "Notice what people need before they ask." I considered the question. "Only when it matters." She didn't answer, just gave a small nod and turned to leave. But halfway down the steps, she paused and looked back. "You're not just nice, are you?" I held her gaze. "No." She stared a second longer, then smiled. Not the polished, performative kind she wore in meetings. This one was uneven, quiet, real, and then she disappeared into the tunnel. The elevator had always been a place of silence, stares at the floor, and polite nods that carried no meaning. But that week, Emma stopped using it. I noticed the first time by chance, heard her heels echoing in the stairwell as I stepped in to avoid the lunchtime crowd. She was a few steps ahead of me, one hand on the railing, the other holding her phone loosely by her side. She didn't look back, just said, "You following me now?" I smiled to myself. Only when it seemed safer than the elevator. She kept walking, her pace deliberate but slower than usual. It was a small gesture, but I understood it for what it was. Permission. We walked the rest of the way in silence, down 6 flights. When we reached the ground floor, she paused. "You take the stairs often?" she asked. "Sometimes. Feels more honest." She tilted her head slightly. "Honest? You earn your descent. Elevators just drop you." That made her laugh quietly. Then she pushed the door open and disappeared into the crowd. After that, it became a thing, unspoken but regular. If we left the office around the same time, we took the stairs. Sometimes I'd wait a few extra minutes at my desk. Sometimes she would. Neither of us said anything about it. The third time it happened, she started talking halfway down. "My mother used to say I was too serious for my age." I glanced at her. "Were you?" "Maybe. I just didn't like pretending things were fine when they weren't. That's not seriousness. That's honesty. Same thing, in some circles." We reached the second floor. She didn't stop. "Do you ever feel out of place here?" she asked. I thought about it. "Not really. I don't try to fit. Makes it easier." She nodded. "I try too hard." All the time, there was a weight behind the words that didn't need explanation. She had spent years becoming the woman people would listen to, and in the process, it seemed, she'd forgotten what her own voice sounded like when no one was watching. At the landing, I held the door open for her. "You know," I said, "you don't have to earn your worth here." She paused. "Then why do I always feel like I'm about to lose it?" "Because no one's ever told you it's not conditional." She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something raw in her expression. Then she stepped outside, and the moment passed. Later that night, I got a message from her. No greeting, just one line. "Thanks for walking with me." I stared at it longer than I should have before replying. "Any time. I'm not in a rush." No typing dots appeared. No response came. But the next evening, she waited for me by the stairwell door, didn't say anything, just looked at me, then started walking. And that was enough. The forecast had said nothing about rain, but by 5 o'clock, the sky had darkened like an apology no one wanted to make, and the downpour began with no warning. People rushed, umbrellas bloomed in frantic bursts, and the city became a chorus of splashes and muttered curses. I lingered by the glass doors in the lobby, watching the chaos outside, already holding my umbrella but in no hurry to step into it. I was half listening to the chatter behind me when I saw her. Emma, coat open, bag clutched tight against her, no umbrella in sight. She wasn't running, just walking with that quiet defiance she wore like armor, letting the rain hit her as if to prove it couldn't hurt her. I stepped forward without thinking and held the umbrella out to cover her path just as she reached the door. She blinked up at me. Water clung to her lashes. "You came prepared." "I usually do." She looked at the umbrella, then at the street. "I'm 2 blocks that way. I've walked farther for worse reasons." She hesitated, then, slowly, stepped in beside me. The umbrella was wide, but not enough to keep both of us dry without leaning closer. She didn't apologize for the space she took, and I didn't adjust mine. We simply walked. The silence between us wasn't empty. It carried the weight of something neither of us had the language for. She walked with her head slightly down, watching her steps, and I matched her pace easily. Halfway down the second block, she spoke. "You know what I miss." I waited. Being around someone and not having to measure every word. That sounds lonely. It is. We stopped at a red light. Water pooled at the corner, and she stepped closer to avoid it, her shoulder brushing mine. "I don't trust people who smile too much," she said. I didn't smile. "I don't trust people who need to be the loudest in the room." She glanced up at me. "So how do you survive in that office?" "I choose who I listen to." She seemed to consider that. When we reached her building, she stopped under the awning and looked up again. "You don't ask questions. I wait for answers. And if they don't come," I folded the umbrella. Then maybe silence was the answer. She watched me for a long moment. Her hair was damp around her face. The collar of her coat darkened from the rain. But there was a calm in her expression I hadn't seen before. "I used to think quiet men were dangerous," she said. "Turns out they're just harder to forget." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She opened the door and stepped inside, but just before it closed behind her, she turned back. "You make me forget I'm always tired." Then she was gone, and I stood there for a long moment, umbrella closed at my side, the rain easing into a steady whisper around me. I never expected her to say yes. The invitation came out quietly, almost by accident, as we walked down the stairwell together at the end of a long Tuesday. It had been a hard day, back-to-back meetings, a board update that had gone sideways, and the kind of tension that stayed long after the last email was sent. We were on the 3rd floor when I said it. "There's a place near my apartment. Quiet, decent food. If you're not rushing home, I was thinking, maybe dinner." She didn't stop walking, didn't even glance at me. For a moment I thought maybe she hadn't heard, but then I shouldn't. Not cold, not sharp, just careful. "Because of work?" I asked. "No," she said, and that was all. We didn't speak the rest of the way down. I didn't push, I didn't even feel embarrassed. I'd offered something and she'd given me an honest answer. That was enough. When we reached the lobby, she paused at the door, turned slightly toward me. "It's not you," she said. I nodded. "I know." She hesitated like she wanted to explain, but then just said, "Good night," and walked into the city. I didn't regret asking, but I felt the quiet heavier that evening. There's a particular kind of ache in unspoken reasons. At home, I left my phone face down, cooked something without taste, read half a page of a book before giving up. I wasn't waiting for a message. Not really. But when the screen finally lit up at 10:47, I knew it was her before I picked it up. "Thank you for seeing me when I don't know how to be seen." It wasn't an apology. It was something truer than that. I read it 3 times, letting the words settle. Then I replied, "You don't have to know how you're already seen." No typing bubbles appeared. No reply came. But I didn't need one. The next morning, she walked past my desk, like always. No coffee cup this time. No lingering glance. Just a small nod, like something had been agreed upon in silence. Later, in the hallway, she brushed past a group of managers, all laughing too loudly. One of them turned to her with some rehearsed compliment about her presentation. She smiled, said thank you, kept walking. But when she saw me at the end of the hall, her smile shifted, smaller but more real. And in that look, I understood. She had declined the dinner, but not the connection. Some things take longer than a meal to build, and what was growing between us didn't need menus or candles. It needed time, and silence, and someone who didn't flinch at either. It was nearly 8 when I realized she was still in the office. The lights on our floor had dimmed to their automatic nighttime setting, and most desks sat empty, ghost-like. I was halfway through a report no one would read properly, when I saw her office door still cracked open, the faint glow of her screen casting a soft rectangle onto the hallway carpet. I didn't knock. I just walked to the door and paused. She didn't look up. Her face was illuminated in blue light, shadows settling beneath her eyes. A half-eaten sandwich sat beside her laptop, untouched. "You missed dinner again," I said. She didn't smile, but her voice was calm. "I didn't notice the time." "You did," I said gently. She leaned back, rubbing her eyes. "It's the forecast reports. I keep rewriting the language, and it still feels like I'm lying." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. "Because you're trying to make bad numbers sound neutral. They want optimism," she said, almost bitterly. "And I want to sleep without waking up in a panic." There was no performance in her tonight. No posture, no pretense. Just a woman sitting in a chair too late, holding up a world that kept threatening to fall. I didn't sit. I stood beside her desk and waited. "You ever feel like the whole machine keeps moving, even when you're falling apart inside it?" she asked. "All the time," I said. "But machines don't care, people do." She looked up at me. Really looked. "You do?" "Yes." She exhaled slowly. "I'm tired of having to be composed, just to be heard. Tired of thinking that if I flinch once, they'll all decide I was never fit to lead. You think they're waiting for you to fail?" No, she said. They just expect me not to. There's a difference. I finally sat, not across from her, beside her, at the edge of the desk. I didn't speak, just listened to the quiet hum of her exhaustion. After a while, she leaned forward, elbows on her knees, hands clasped. "You scare me sometimes," she said. I didn't react. "Why?" "Because I don't have to pretend around you, and I don't know who I am without the pretending." "You're allowed to not know," she shook her head. "But what if who I am under all this isn't enough?" "That's not for them to decide," I said, "and it's not for me either. But I'm not here because of what you prove. I'm here because of what you carry." She went quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ribs. When she finally spoke again, her voice was softer. "I'm not used to people staying. I'm not most people." We didn't move. We didn't fill the air with more words than needed. She didn't cry, but her eyes glistened, and she didn't look away from me this time. "I won't ask you to catch me," she said. "You don't have to," I answered. "I'm already standing underneath." It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise. It was a truth that didn't ask for permission. It was Saturday when I saw her again, and I hadn't expected to. There's something about weekends that makes people invisible to each other outside the context of work. Like we all disappear into private lives that don't intersect with the roles we play during the week. I was in a bookstore, quiet, unassuming, tucked between a pharmacy and a tailor shop that had long since stopped altering anything but expectations. The kind of place that smelled of old paper and soft wood, where time moved slower and no one rushed you out. I was flipping through a worn edition of a book I already owned when I felt her beside me. "Didn't peg you for the Saturday morning bookstore type," she said. I didn't look surprised. "Didn't peg you for the type to wander without a purpose." She shrugged, glancing at the shelves. "Maybe I needed to be somewhere that doesn't expect me to fix anything." There was no makeup on her face. No blazer, no heels, just a long coat and a scarf loosely knotted at her neck. She looked unguarded, not softer, just more honest. "Find anything good?" she asked. "Only books that remind me what I've forgotten." She tilted her head. "Which is that sometimes the stories we need find us before we're ready." She gave me a look, half smile, half something else. "That sounds like projection." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just know what it feels like to be chosen by something before I understand why." We walked together slowly through the aisles. At first, we talked about books, safe ground. What we'd loved as children, what we'd lied about reading in college, which authors made us feel understood and which made us feel small. But then the spaces between our sentences grew longer, and the silences more comfortable. She stopped at a table stacked with poetry collections, picked one up, opened it to a page, then another. Her fingers moved like she was searching for something she didn't know how to name. "I used to write," she said, not looking at me. "What happened?" "I got promoted." The honesty in that sentence hit harder than it should have. "You miss it?" "Sometimes, but missing something isn't the same as needing it." "And do you need it?" She was quiet for a beat too long, then closed the book and set it down. "Maybe I just need to remember who I was before I had to perform every minute of the day." "That person's not gone," I said. She looked at me, eyes steady. "How would you know?" "Because I've met her," I said. "She still shows up when you're not watching." We left without buying anything. Outside, the sun was trying its best to break through the winter cloud cover. She walked beside me without any sense of urgency, her pace matching mine like we'd practiced. As we reached the corner where our paths would split, she stopped. "Why do you keep doing this?" she asked. "Doing what?" "Showing up, walking beside me, listening." "Because you don't ask me to," I said. She studied me for a long moment, as if looking for the edge of something that wasn't there. Then she said, almost quietly, "I never thought I'd be the kind of person someone would wait for." "You don't have to be," I said. "You just have to be someone worth finding." And then we stood there, in the middle of a city that never slowed down, while something between us quietly did. The cafeteria was louder than usual. Someone had brought cupcakes for a birthday no one remembered to celebrate, and people clustered around the table near the window, laughing too loudly over jokes that didn't quite land. I sat alone, as I usually did, not out of exclusion, but preference. There's a kind of peace in not performing at lunch. I was halfway through a cup of burnt coffee when I saw her enter. Emma. Perfect posture, unreadable face, the familiar rhythm of confidence she wore like a tailored suit. She glanced around once, quick, precise. I could almost feel her measuring the room. Then she walked past the director's table, ignoring a half-hearted wave from someone she used to impress, and sat down across from me without asking. No ceremony, no explanation. Just her and the sound of coffee being poured. She didn't speak right away. Neither did I. She opened a container from her bag and picked at a salad she clearly didn't want. We let the noise around us fade into something distant. She looked tired, but not in the fragile way. More like someone who had decided to stop resisting the weight on her shoulders and just let it rest for a while. After a few minutes, she spoke. "I had dinner with my father last night." I nodded, waiting. "He said I've become cold," she said. "That I don't let anyone close, that it's why I'll end up alone." There was no bitterness in her voice. Just an odd, detached reflection, like she was repeating something she'd already heard in her own head. Only now it had an echo. "Do you believe him?" I asked. She looked at me. "I don't know. I think I've just stopped needing people to prove themselves before I keep them at a distance." "That's not cold," I said. "That's what people do when they've been left too many times." She didn't answer, just stared at her fork, like it might hold a better truth. Then, softly, "I used to think I needed to be chosen. Now I think I just don't want to be abandoned." There it was, the core of it, not power, not control. Just the quiet ache of someone tired of holding the door open to empty rooms. "I didn't sit here to be seen," she said. "I sat here because I wanted to feel safe. And do you?" She looked up. "I think I'm starting to—" It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't romantic. But it was real. More real than anything either of us had said in weeks. We finished lunch without talking again. The silence didn't ask for anything. It just stayed with us. As she stood to leave, she placed her empty container back in her bag, then glanced down at my untouched cupcake. "Are you going to eat that?" "No." She took it without asking. Her fingers brushed mine, intentionally this time, not by accident, not by proximity, by choice. Then she walked away, shoulders straighter, footsteps lighter, and I realized that in a room full of noise, the only thing that had truly happened was quiet. But in that quiet, she had chosen where to sit, and that changed everything. She was standing by the window when I saw her that morning. Not her office window, the one in the corridor that overlooked nothing but the edge of the parking lot and a crooked skyline most people ignored. Her arms were folded, not in defense, but stillness, as if holding something close, as if bracing for a decision that hadn't yet arrived. I didn't interrupt. I waited. When she finally turned, her expression was unreadable, not guarded, just undecided. "There's a meeting this afternoon," she said. "Big one." I nodded. "I saw it on the calendar. They want me to lead the strategy shift. New structure, new teams. It's a move upward, technically." "Technically," I repeated. She looked away again. "It means longer hours, more scrutiny, fewer reasons to breathe." "And?" I said yes. I didn't react. She needed to say it out loud, not have it judged. "But I keep wondering," she went on, "how far I can keep going before I forget what it feels like to want something that doesn't come with a title." That was when I stepped closer. Not because she needed support, because she was asking without asking. "You're allowed to want more than what they hand you," I said. "You're allowed to want something that waits for you, not pulls you apart." She didn't answer, but the silence stretched gently between us. Like a rope we were both holding at opposite ends. Not taut, not strained, just there. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to choose stillness over momentum," she said. "You don't have to stop," I told her. "Just know where to return." Her eyes met mine then, steady, no longer uncertain. "And if I get lost in there, I'll be here when you come out." A quiet breath escaped her lips, more surrender than relief. She stepped past me, brushing my sleeve with her hand. A contact brief, but intentional. Later that afternoon, as the building buzzed with the weight of the upcoming presentation, I stayed at my desk. I didn't watch the time. I didn't wonder what was happening behind the closed doors. At 4:18, she walked back into the main office, her jacket draped over one arm, papers in hand, expression unreadable again, but her steps were slower, like she was walking towards something instead of away from everything else. She didn't speak to anyone, just made her way toward me and paused at my desk. "I didn't get lost," she said. "I know." She looked at me, and in that moment, it was clear. We hadn't made promises, we hadn't defined anything, but a line had been drawn quietly between two lives, one before, one after. "I'll call it a win if I remember to exhale tonight," she said. "I'll be here either way." And then she smiled, not the tired smile, not the professional one, just a real one, small and quiet, like a door easing open. She didn't stay. She didn't need to. Not an ending, but already a beginning.